In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a gunshot echoes, and Sir Reginald Ashburn is found dead in a locked library. Suicide, or something far more sinister. Why was a cryptic letter about a sealed vault left unfinished? What secrets does a single gold cufflink hide? Join Sherlock Holmes, the brilliant Belgian detective, as he unravels a web of betrayal, greed, and murder among a circle of suspects, each with motives as dark as the manor's secrets. Will his little grey cells uncover the truth before the killer strikes again? Dive into a classic mystery where every clue counts and the final twist will leave you stunned. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Blackthorn Manor. In the waning days of October, when the mists clung to the rolling hills of Kent like a conspirator's cloak, Blackthorn Manor stood as a monument to opulence and secrecy. The estate, with its towering gables and ivy-clad walls, was the ancestral seat of the Ashburn family, a lineage whose wealth was matched only by their penchant for privacy. It was here, in the autumn of 1925, that a gathering of notable personages assembled under the pretext of a weekend retreat, though the air was thick with unspoken motives. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the faithful chronicler of Sherlock Holmes's exploits, arrived at the manor on a crisp Friday evening. The invitation had come from Sir Reginald Ashburn, a retired diplomat whose genial demeanor belied a mind sharpened by years of navigating international intrigues. Hastings, though no stranger to high society, felt a prickle of unease as he stepped from the motorcar onto the gravel drive. The manor's windows glowed with a warmth that seemed at odds with the chill in his bones, a chill that had little to do with the weather. "Mon ami," came a familiar voice, precise and accented, as Sherlock Holmes emerged from the shadows of the portico. The Belgian detective, small of stature but immense in presence, adjusted his perfectly knotted tie with a fastidious flick of his fingers. His grey eyes, sharp as a falcon's, surveyed the scene with an intensity that made Hastings feel as though the very stones of the manor were under scrutiny. "You are late, Hastings. The little grey cells, they do not approve of tardiness." "My apologies, Poirot." Sherlock's expertise. The guest list, however, was intriguing. Lady Beatrice Langley, a society matron with a penchant for philanthropy and gossip. Mr. Charles Vane, a financier rumored to be on the brink of ruin. Dr. Evelyn Warwick, a physician with a reputation for unorthodox methods. Miss Clara Ashbourne, Sir Reginald's niece and sole heir. And Mr. Julian Trent, a solicitor with a shadowy past. There were others, servants, a butler named Hargreaves, and a young maid, Emily, but these were the principal players. "The stage is set, Hastings," Sherlock murmured, his eyes gleaming. "And in such a setting, the drama is never far behind." The interior of Blackthorn Manor was as grand as its exterior promised. The great hall, panelled in dark oak and adorned with portraits of stern-faced Ashbournes, led to a drawing-room where the guests were gathered. A fire roared in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the faces of those present. Sir Reginald, tall and silver-haired, greeted Sherlock and Hastings with a warmth that seemed almost too effusive. "Monsieur Sherlock, Captain Hastings, I am delighted you could join us," he said, his voice resonant with the polish of a seasoned orator. "This weekend is to be a celebration of sorts, but I confess I have need of your particular talents." Sherlock raised an eyebrow, his hands clasped behind his back. "A celebration, Sir Reginald. Yet your invitation spoke of a delicate matter. Perhaps you will enlighten Sherlock as to its nature." Sir Reginald's smile faltered, and he glanced at the assembled company. Lady Beatrice, resplendent in emerald silk, was engaged in animated conversation with Miss Clara, whose delicate features were marred by a nervous fidgeting of her hands. Mr. Vane, a heavy-set man with a florid complexion, stared into his brandy glass as though it held the secrets of the universe. Dr. Warwick, a woman of striking intellect and reserved demeanor, watched the room with a clinician's detachment. Mr. Trent, lean and sharp, at Sherlock, who was studying the guests with an intensity that suggested he had already begun to unravel the threads of some unseen tapestry. After dinner, the party dispersed to the drawing room, where cards and conversation provided a veneer of normalcy. Sherlock, however, declined to join the games, instead pacing slowly along the perimeter of the room, his eyes lingering on small details. A smudge on the fireplace mantel, a book left open on a side table, the way Mr. Vane's hand trembled as he dealt the cards. Hastings, accustomed to his friend's methods, knew that these observations were not idle. To Sherlock, the world was a canvas of clues, each stroke revealing a hidden truth. As the clock struck 10, a scream pierced the air, sharp and chilling. The guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock and fear. The sound had come from the direction of the library, a room adjacent to the drawing room. Sherlock was the first to move, his compact frame darting toward the door with surprising agility. Hastings followed, his heart pounding as the others trailed behind. The library was a cavern of shadows, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes. At its center stood a massive oak desk, and behind it, slumped in a chair, was Sir Reginald Ashbourne. His face was pale, his eyes wide and unseeing. A thin trickle of blood seeped from a wound at his temple, and a revolver lay on the desk before him. "Good heavens!" Hastings exclaimed, his voice trembling. "He's been shot!" Sherlock, however, was already at work, his gloved hands moving with deliberate care. He examined the revolver, the position of the body, the papers scattered on the desk. His face was a mask of concentration, but his eyes burned with a fierce intensity. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, straightening. "This is no accident, Hastings." The guests crowded at the doorway, their gasps and murmurs filling the air. Lady Beatrice clutched her pearls, her face ashen. Mr. Vane muttered something incoherent, while Miss Clara let out a choked sob. Dr. Warwick stepped forward, her medical instincts overriding her shock, but Sherlock raised a hand to stop her. "Do not touch anything, madame," he said. Drama of deception and death. And Sherlock Holmes, with his little grey cells, was determined to bring the truth to light. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The library of Blackthorn Manor, now a chamber of tragedy, seemed to hold its breath as the reality of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's death settled over the assembled company. The air was thick with the scent of old books and the acrid tang of gunpowder, a grim reminder of the violence that had shattered the evening's civility. Sherlock Holmes, his compact figure a beacon of calm amidst the chaos, stood at the center of the room, his grey eyes scanning every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. Captain Arthur Hastings, stationed near the door, watched his friend with a mixture of awe and apprehension, knowing that the wheels of Sherlock's mind were already turning. "Mon ami," Sherlock said, turning to Hastings, "observe, if you please, the disposition of the room. The little details, they speak louder than the loudest cries." Hastings nodded, though he felt woefully inadequate to the task. The library was a grand space, its high ceilings adorned with ornate plasterwork, its walls lined with shelves that groaned under the weight of countless volumes. A single chandelier cast a dim glow, its light catching the polished surface of the oak desk where Sir Reginald's body slumped. The revolver, a sleek Webley, lay within arm's reach of the corpse, its barrel still warm. Papers were scattered across the desk, some stained with ink, others crumpled as though gripped in a moment of distress. A heavy brass paperweight, shaped like a lion's head, rested precariously near the edge. Sherlock moved with deliberate care, his gloved hands hovering over the scene without touching. He noted the position of Sir Reginald's body, slumped forward, his right hand limp near the revolver, his left clutching a pen. A small pool of blood had formed beneath his head, seeping into the blotting paper. The window behind the desk was shut tight, its latch undisturbed, and the heavy velvet curtains were drawn, admitting no glimpse of the night beyond. "The door," Sherlock murmured, glancing toward the heavy oak portal through which they had entered. "Hargreaves, the butler, you will confirm. Was it locked when the scream was heard?" Hargreaves, a stooped man with a face like weathered pine that seemed to do little to soothe the young woman's distress. Miss Clara's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, and she trembled as though caught in a winter gale. Mr. Charles Vane, the financier, mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his florid complexion now a sickly grey. Dr. Evelyn Warwick stood apart, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Sherlock with a mixture of curiosity and defiance. Mr. Julian Trent, the solicitor, leaned against the doorframe, his sharp features unreadable, but his eyes darting to every movement in the room. "Sherlock," Hastings ventured, "do you think it possible that Sir Reginald took his own life? The locked door, the revolver." Sherlock raised a hand, silencing him. "Possible, Hastings, but improbable. The little grey cells, they protest at such a simplistic solution. Observe the papers on the desk. They are disordered, yes, but not as one would expect from a man in despair. And the angle of the wound? No, it is not consistent with a self-inflicted shot. We are dealing with murder, mon ami, and a clever one at that." The local police arrived shortly thereafter, led by Inspector Grayson, a stout man with a bristling moustache and a demeanor that suggested he resented Sherlock's presence. "Monsieur Sherlock," he said gruffly, "I trust you'll not interfere with proper police procedure." Sherlock smiled, a gesture that held no warmth. "Interfere, Inspector? No, I merely assist. The truth, it is my only concern." Grayson grunted, directing his constables to secure the scene. Sherlock, however, continued his examination, undeterred by the inspector's bristling authority. He knelt beside the desk, peering at the floor, where a faint scuff mark marred the polished wood. He then turned his attention to the revolver, noting its position and the faint smudge of powder on Sir Reginald's right hand. "Interesting," he murmured, his fingers tracing the air above the weapon. "The powder residue is present, yet the grip, no, it is not quite right. Hastings, what do you make of the papers?" Sherlock's smile was razor-sharp. "Simple, Inspector? The truth, it is never simple. Why then was the letter unfinished? Why the mention of a vault? And why, pray, was the door locked from the inside, yet the key found in Hargreaves' possession?" Grayson's face reddened, but he had no reply. Sherlock turned to the guests, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, I require your cooperation. Each of you will provide a statement of your movements this evening, from the moment dinner concluded until the scream was heard. No detail is too small." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared refuse. Lady Beatrice spoke first, her voice trembling. "I was in the drawing-room, playing bridge with Clara and Mr. Vane. We heard the scream and rushed here." Miss Clara nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I was with Lady Beatrice. I stepped into the hall to fetch my shawl, and that's when I heard the shot. I screamed and tried the door, but it was locked." Mr. Vane cleared his throat, his hands fidgeting. "I was at the card table, as Lady Beatrice said. I didn't hear anything until Clara's scream." Dr. Warwick's account was precise, almost clinical. "I was in the conservatory, examining Sir Reginald's collection of orchids. I heard the scream and came at once." Mr. Trent, last to speak, offered a clipped response. "I was in the billiard room, alone, practicing my shots. The scream brought me here." Sherlock, listened in silence, his eyes moving from one face to another, as though reading the thoughts behind their words. "Mercy," he said at last. "Your accounts are noted. Now I suggest you retire to your rooms. The police will guard the manor, and no one is to leave until I have spoken with you again." As the guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the silent halls, Hastings approached Sherlock. "What do you make of it, old chap? A locked room, a gunshot, and not a soul in sight. It's a devil of a puzzle." Sherlock's lips curved into a faint smile. A somber affair. The clink of silverware against porcelain, the only sound breaking the heavy silence. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated at the long mahogany table, felt the weight of the previous night's events pressing upon him, his appetite dulled by the memory of Sir Reginald's lifeless form. Sherlock Holmes, however, appeared untouched by the gloom. He sat opposite Hastings, his posture impeccable, his small hands deftly buttering a slice of toast with the precision of a surgeon. His grey eyes, ever alert, darted from one guest to another, noting the pallor of Miss Clara's cheeks, the nervous tick in Mr. Vane's jaw, the cool detachment in Dr. Warwick's gaze. To an outsider, Sherlock might have seemed merely a fastidious foreigner enjoying his meal, but Hastings knew better. The little grey cells were at work, weaving a tapestry from the threads of human behaviour. "Mon ami," Sherlock said, his voice low enough to avoid the ears of the others. "You observe, but you do not see. Look at their hands, Hastings. The hands. They betray the heart." Hastings followed his friend's gaze. Lady Beatrice's fingers clutched her teacup so tightly that her knuckles whitened. Mr. Vane's hands, large and unsteady, fumbled with his fork, dropping it twice. Miss Clara's were folded in her lap, but her nails dug into her palms, leaving faint crescent marks. Dr. Warwick's were steady, almost unnaturally so, as she sliced an apple with surgical precision. Mr. Trent, seated at the far end, toyed with a silver cigarette case, opening and closing it with a rhythmic click. Before Hastings could respond, the butler, Hargreaves, entered the dining room, his face as impassive as ever. "Monsieur Sherlock," he said, bowing slightly, "Inspector Grayson requests your presence in the library. He wishes to discuss the situation." Sherlock's lips curved into a faint smile. "Bien. Let us see what our good inspector has discovered in the night. Come, Hastings." The library, now cordoned off by a constable, was much as they had left it, save for the absence of Sir Reginald's body, which had been removed to the local morgue. Inspector Grayson stood near the desk, his moustache bristling with irritation. Scattered papers remained untouched, save for the police's careful cataloguing. The cryptic letter Hastings had noticed the previous night was still there, its words unchanged. "The vault must remain sealed. The consequences of its opening are too grave to contemplate." Sherlock picked up the letter, holding it to the light. "The ink," he murmured, "is fresh. But the pen, observe, Hastings, it is dry. No ink in the nib, yet the letter is newly written. Curious, no?" Hastings frowned, struggling to follow. "Perhaps he used a different pen." "Perhaps," Sherlock said, but his tone suggested he thought otherwise. He turned his attention to the revolver, now bagged as evidence but still on the desk for inspection. He examined it through the clear wrapping, noting the position of the trigger guard and the faint smudge of powder residue. "The fingerprints, Inspector," Sherlock said, addressing Grayson. "You say they are Sir Reginald's alone, but are they in the correct orientation for a man firing upon himself?" Grayson's face reddened. "What are you implying, sir?" "The prints are his, clear as day." "Clear, yes," Sherlock replied, "but clarity is not truth. The angle of the wound, it is slightly upward, which is unusual for a self-inflicted shot. And the powder residue, no, it is not distributed as one would expect. We must consider the possibility of manipulation." Grayson opened his mouth to protest, but Sherlock was already moving, his attention drawn to the heavy brass paperweight. He lifted it carefully, turning it in his hands. A faint scratch marred its base, barely visible but distinct to his keen eye. "This," he said almost to himself, "was moved recently. The dust on the desk, it does not lie evenly beneath Hastings, trying to keep pace, ventured. Could it have been used to strike him, perhaps? Before the shot?" Sherlock shook his head. "No, Hastings. The wound is from a bullet, not a blow. But this paperweight, it has a story to tell. We shall listen." Leaving the library, Sherlock requested a tour of the manor, a request Grayson grudgingly granted. Hargreaves led them through the labyrinthine halls, past portraits of Vault Hastings. It is the heart of this mystery. Sir Reginald's letter spoke of its secrecy, and now he is dead. We must learn what it contains, and why someone would kill to keep it hidden. The morning passed in a flurry of interviews, Sherlock questioning each guest with a calm that belied the intensity of his scrutiny. Lady Beatrice spoke of Sir Reginald's recent preoccupation, hinting at financial troubles. Miss Clara, tearful, admitted to a heated argument with her uncle the previous week, though she refused to disclose its cause. Mr. Vane, sweating profusely, claimed ignorance of any vault, but admitted to owing Sir Reginald a substantial sum. Dr. Warwick was reserved, offering only that Sir Reginald had consulted her about a minor ailment days before. Mr. Trent, the solicitor, was evasive, insisting he knew nothing of a vault beyond its existence in the manor's records. Each account, though seemingly straightforward, was laced with contradictions that Sherlock noted with a subtle nod. To Hastings he confided, "They all lie, mon ami, but not in the same way. Some hide their motives, others their actions. We must sift the truth from the deception." As noon approached, Sherlock requested a moment alone in the drawing-room, where he stood before the fireplace, his hands clasped, his eyes half-closed. Hastings recognized this as the prelude to one of Sherlock's meditative trances, when the little grey cells worked their magic. He remained silent, watching as his friend's mind unraveled the threads of the mystery. "The locked room," Sherlock said at last, his voice a murmur. "It is not what it seems. The vault, the letter, the paperweight. These are pieces of a puzzle, Hastings, and they fit together in a way that is most ingenious. We are dealing with a mind that plans with precision, yet overlooks the smallest details." "What do you mean, Sherlock?" Hastings asked, his curiosity piqued. Sherlock's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it reveals itself in time. For now, we must watch, listen, and wait. The murderer is among us, and they will betray themselves before long." As they rejoined the others, that even Grayson could not ignore, Captain Arthur Hastings sat near the fireplace, his notebook open, scribbling observations as Sherlock began his interviews. The Belgian detective stood by a tall window, the grey light filtering through the leaded panes, casting his shadow across the polished floor. His hands were clasped behind his back, his head slightly tilted, as though listening to a melody only he could hear. To Hastings, it was a familiar sight, Sherlock in his element, sifting through the chaos of human motives with the meticulous care of a jeweler examining a flawed gem. "Mesdames et messieurs," Sherlock began, his voice clear and measured, "we are gathered to uncover the truth of Sir Reginald's death. Each of you will answer my questions with candor. The smallest detail, it may be the key to the puzzle. We begin with you, Lady Beatrice Langley." Seated in a high-backed chair, stiffened at the sound of her name. Her emerald gown, though still elegant, seemed to hang heavily on her frame, as though the events of the night had drained her vitality. She clutched a lace handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously to the other guests before settling on Sherlock. "Monsieur Sherlock," she said, her voice trembling but striving for composure, "I assure you, I know nothing of this dreadful business. Sir Reginald was a dear friend, and I was in the drawing room playing bridge when the tragedy occurred." Sherlock's eyes narrowed slightly, though his smile remained polite. "Oui, madame, so you have said. But let us be precise. At what time did you retire to the drawing room after dinner?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, twisting the handkerchief in her hands. "It must have been just after 9. We, Clara, Mr. Vane, and I, began our game almost at once." "And you saw no one enter or leave the library during this time?" Sherlock pressed. "No, none of us did," she replied quickly, then faltered. "That is, I was focused on the cards. I cannot say for certain." Sherlock nodded, as though her uncertainty was expected. "Merci, madame. We shall return to you later. Next," he turned to Miss as to its nature. Clara's cheeks flushed, and she looked away. "It was a private matter. He disapproved of a friend I had made in London. It was nothing more." Sherlock did not press further, but Hastings noted the slight tilt of his head, a sign that he had filed away her response for later scrutiny. He moved on to Mr. Charles Vane, the financier, whose florid complexion seemed to deepen under Sherlock's gaze. "Mr. Vane," Sherlock said, "you were in debt to Sir Reginald, were you not? A considerable sum, I understand." Vane's hand trembled as he reached for his glass of water, nearly spilling it. I had some financial difficulties, yes. Sir Reginald was kind enough to extend me a loan. But I had every intention of repaying him." "And yet," Sherlock said, his voice smooth as silk, "you were in the drawing room playing bridge while your creditor lay dead. Did you hear anything unusual before the scream?" Vane shook his head vigorously. "Nothing at all. Just the usual chatter and the clink of glasses. I was focused on the game." Sherlock's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. "Of course. Merci, monsieur." Dr. Evelyn Warwick was next, her demeanour as composed as ever. She met Sherlock's gaze without flinching, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Doctor," Sherlock said, "you were in the conservatory, examining orchids at the time of the murder. A curious choice for the hour, no?" Dr. Warwick's lips curved into a slight smile. "Not at all, Monsieur Sherlock. I have an interest in botany, and Sir Reginald's collection is remarkable. I was there until I heard Miss Clara's scream." "And you saw no one enter or leave the library?" Sherlock asked. "No one," she replied firmly. "The conservatory is at the opposite end of the house." Sherlock nodded, his expression unreadable. Finally he turned to Mr. Julian Trent, the solicitor, who had been watching the proceedings with a hawk-like intensity. "Monsieur Trent," Sherlock said, "you were in the billiard room, alone, practicing your shots. A solitary pursuit for a social evening, perhaps." Trent's sharp features tightened. "Isn't there?" Sherlock's eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. "Plausible, yes, Hastings, but the truth lies in the contradictions." Lady Beatrice hesitates, as though hiding a detail. Miss Clara's argument with her uncle. It is more significant than she admits. Mr. Vane's debt gives him motive, yet his fear suggests something deeper. Dr. Warwick is too composed, and Mr. Trent, his solitude, is convenient, no? We must look beyond their words to their actions. Sherlock led Hastings to a small study, where he requested Hargreaves to bring him the manor's floor plans. As the butler complied, Sherlock spread the plans across a table, his fingers tracing the layout of the library and its adjacent rooms. "The library," he said, "is accessible only through the door and the window, both secured. Yet the murderer entered and left without trace. How, Hastings?" Hastings frowned, studying the plans. "Could there be a secret passage? These old houses often have them." Sherlock's smile was approving. "A good thought, mon ami, but we shall see. For now, I am interested in the timing. The shot was heard at 10, yet the scream came moments later. Why the delay, and why did Miss Clara try the door if she heard the shot? Before Hastings could respond, Hargreaves returned with a small leather-bound book, which he handed to Sherlock. "Sir Reginald's appointment diary, sir, as you requested." Sherlock flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the neat handwriting. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to an entry dated the previous week. "A meeting with Mr. Trent concerning the vault. And here, a note to consult Dr. Warwick about a matter of health. Most intriguing." As the afternoon waned, Sherlock's inquiries grew more focused, his questions probing deeper into the guests' alibis and motives. Each answer added a piece to the puzzle, but the picture remained maddeningly incomplete. The vault, the locked door, the cryptic letter, these were the threads of a mystery that only Sherlock Holmes could unravel. "Hastings," Sherlock said as they retired to their rooms, "the game grows more complex." Library desk lingered in his mind, as did the cryptic words of the unfinished letter. The vault must remain sealed. Sherlock Holmes, however, appeared as composed as ever, his small frame impeccable in a tailored suit, his gray eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. He stood by the window, gazing out at the mist-shrouded gardens, his fingers tapping a rhythm against the sill. To Hastings, it was clear that his friend was not merely observing the landscape, but piecing together the intricate puzzle of the crime. "Mon ami," Sherlock said, turning to Hastings, "the case, it progresses. But we must be wary of the red herrings, those distractions that lead the unwary astray. The police? They are already ensnared." Hastings frowned, setting down his cup. "Red herrings? You mean Grayson's theory of suicide?" "Précisément," Sherlock replied, his voice tinged with disdain. "The inspector sees the locked door, the revolver, the fingerprints, and concludes the matter is simple. But simplicity, it is the enemy of truth. Come, let us join him in the library." The library, still cordoned off by a constable, was a hive of activity. Inspector Grayson stood at the desk, poring over a report from the coroner. His face, already stern, grew sterner still as Sherlock and Hastings entered. "Monsieur Sherlock," he said, his tone barely civil, "the coroner confirms it. Death by a single gunshot to the temple, fired at close range. The powder residue matches the revolver, and Sir Reginald's fingerprints are on the grip. The case is clear." Sherlock's lips curved into a faint smile, one that Hastings recognized as a prelude to a devastating observation. "Clear, Inspector. Then perhaps you can explain why a man intending to end his life would write an unfinished letter about a vault, or why the pen on the desk is dry, yet the ink is fresh. No, the case is far from clear." Grayson's mustache twitched, but he held his ground. "You're overcomplicating things, sir. We've found a motive. Sir Reginald was in financial trouble. His investments were failing, and he faced ruin. He locked himself in and took the easy way out." Sherlock raised an eyebrow, his hands clasped behind his back. "Financial trouble?" Doorway. His face was flushed, his eyes wild with agitation. "Inspector!" he exclaimed, his voice trembling. "I must speak with you at once!" Sherlock's gaze sharpened, and he gestured for Vane to enter. "Monsieur Vane, your urgency is most intriguing. Pray, share your revelation." Vane mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his hands shaking. It's about Sir Reginald's death. I didn't want to say before, but I saw something that night. Just before the scream, I glanced out the drawing-room window and saw a figure moving toward the library. It was dark, but I'm certain it was Julian Trent. The room fell silent, the accusation hanging in the air like a thunderclap. Hastings felt a jolt of surprise. Trent, the solicitor, had claimed to be in the billiard room, alone. If Vane's story was true, it placed Trent near the scene of the crime at the critical moment. Sherlock's expression remained impassive, though his eyes gleamed with interest. "A figure, you say? And you are certain it was Monsieur Trent? The light. It was poor, no?" Vane nodded vigorously. "I know what I saw. He was wearing that grey coat of his, and he moved quickly, as though he didn't want to be seen." Grayson seized upon the statement, his eyes narrowing. "Trent, eh? That changes things. We'll bring him in for questioning at once." Sherlock raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Un moment, Inspector. Monsieur Vane's observation is valuable, but we must verify it. The drawing-room window faces the east wing, yes? The path to the library is obscured by shrubbery. How, then, did you see so clearly?" Vane faltered, his confidence waning. I was standing near the window, looking out. It was just a glimpse, but I'm sure it was him." Sherlock nodded, as though satisfied. But Hastings knew his friend was far from convinced. "Merci, Monsieur Vane. You have given us much to consider. Inspector, perhaps you will allow me to speak with Monsieur Trent." Grayson grudgingly agreed, and Trent was summoned. The solicitor entered with his usual air of "Monsieur Trent, we shall see." As Trent left, Hastings leaned toward Sherlock. "Do you believe Vane? His story seems damning, but Trent was so calm." "Calm, yes," Sherlock murmured. "But the truth, it hides behind such calmness. Vane's accusation is a red herring, Hastings, a distraction meant to divert us. His nervousness, his eagerness to point the finger, it suggests he knows more than he admits. But we must not be swayed. The truth lies elsewhere." The interviews continued, with Sherlock probing each guest's alibi with relentless precision. Lady Beatrice admitted to overhearing a heated exchange between Sir Reginald and Miss Clara days before, though she claimed ignorance of its details. Miss Clara, when pressed, grew tearful, insisting the argument was merely about her social circle. Dr. Warwick remained aloof, her answers precise but unrevealing. Each statement, though plausible, seemed to conceal a deeper truth, and Sherlock's questions grew sharper, like a fencer testing an opponent's defenses. As the afternoon drew to a close, Sherlock requested access to the vault, a request that sent a ripple of unease through the household. Hargreaves, the butler, produced the key found on Sir Reginald's body, and Inspector Grayson accompanied Sherlock and Hastings to the east wing. The iron door, cold and unyielding, loomed before them, its lock gleaming in the dim light. "The vault," Sherlock said, his voice low, "it holds the secret that cost Sir Reginald his life. We shall see what it reveals." Hargreaves inserted the key, and the lock clicked open with a heavy thud. The door swung inward, revealing a small, dimly lit chamber lined with steel boxes. At its center stood a single safe, its dial intricate and foreboding. Sherlock stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room with the intensity of a hawk. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his fingers brushing the safe's surface. "The vault is locked, yet its contents are the key to this mystery. We must discover what Sir Reginald sought to protect, and why someone would kill to keep it hidden." As they left the vault, Hastings felt a chill that had little to do with the cold stone walls. The red herrings were multiplying, but Sherlock's mind was a net, ready to catch the truth amidst the deception. Against the flickering flames, he held a small object in his gloved hand, a single cufflink, gold with an engraved crest, which he had retrieved from the library floor during his morning inspection. His grey eyes studied it with an intensity that made Hastings feel as though the cufflink were a portal to the truth itself. "Mon ami," Sherlock said, turning to Hastings, "the smallest detail, it can shift the entire picture. This cufflink, observe its design. It is not common, no? The crest, it is that of the Ashburn family." Hastings leaned closer, squinting at the intricate engraving. A lion rampant, encircled by a wreath of thorns. "Good heavens, Sherlock! Do you think it belonged to Sir Reginald? But he wasn't wearing cuffs that night, was he?" "Précisément," Sherlock replied, his voice low and deliberate. Sir Reginald's attire was impeccable, yet his shirt bore simple buttons, not cufflinks. It belongs to another, and its presence on the library floor, near the desk, is most suggestive. Before Hastings could respond, Inspector Grayson entered, his face set in a scowl. Monsieur Sherlock, I've had enough of your theatrics. We've questioned Trent about Vane's accusation, and he denies it flatly. Without evidence, we can't hold him. The suicide theory still stands. Sherlock's smile was a razor's edge. Suicide, Inspector? Then explain this cufflink, found beneath the desk, far from where Sir Reginald fell. A man does not lose such an item in the act of taking his own life. No. This points to another presence in the room. Grayson's eyes narrowed, but he took the cufflink, examining it grudgingly. Could be anyone's. These old families all have similar trinkets. Perhaps, Sherlock said, but we shall verify. Hargreaves! The butler appeared, his face as impassive as ever. Sherlock held up the cufflink. This crest, it is the Ashburn family's, we? To whom might such a cufflink belong? Hargreaves studied the item, his brow furrowing slightly. It is indeed the family.
Alibi was unshaken, but his sharp eyes betrayed a flicker of unease when Sherlock mentioned the cufflink. As evening approached, Sherlock turned his attention to the library once more, this time focusing on a detail that had gone unnoticed by the police. The fireplace. The hearth, though swept clean, bore faint traces of ash that seemed out of place. Sherlock knelt, his fingers brushing the stone, and retrieved a small fragment of charred paper, no larger than a postage stamp. The ink was smudged, but a single word was legible. Trust. Hastings, Sherlock said, holding up the fragment. This paper, it was burned recently, yet the fire was not lit when we entered the library. Why burn a single scrap? And why this word, trust? Hastings frowned, his mind racing. Could it be part of another letter? Something Sir Reginald wrote and someone tried to destroy? Exactement, Sherlock replied, his eyes gleaming. The letter on the desk spoke of a vault and its consequences. This fragment, it suggests another message, one that someone wished to conceal. We must reconstruct its meaning. Sherlock's next move was to summon Hargreaves again, this time to inquire about the fireplace's maintenance. The butler confirmed that the library fire had not been lit that evening, as Sir Reginald preferred to work in cooler conditions. The ashes, Hargreaves added, are from the previous day's fire, swept out that morning. Then this paper, Sherlock said, was burned elsewhere and brought here, or burned in haste after the murder. Either way, it is a clue of great significance. The guests, meanwhile, grew increasingly restive under the strain of confinement. At dinner, the atmosphere was taut, with whispered conversations and sidelong glances. Lady Beatrice, usually voluble, was subdued, her eyes fixed on her plate. Miss Clara, seated beside her, picked at her food, her hands trembling. Mr. Vane drank heavily, his earlier accusation against Trent now a source of visible discomfort. Dr. Warwick maintained her cool detachment, though Hastings noticed her watching Sherlock with a keen interest. Trent, ever the outlier, excused himself early, claiming a headache. After dinner, Sherlock requested a private audience with Miss Clara, who seemed on the verge of collapse.
I mentioned it once, in passing, but it was nothing serious. Please, Monsieur Sherlock, I had nothing to do with Uncle's death. Sherlock's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp. I believe you, mademoiselle, but the truth, it requires all pieces of the puzzle. The cufflink, have you seen its like before? Clara glanced at the cufflink, which Sherlock produced from his pocket. Her breath caught, and she nodded slowly. It's like one Uncle kept in his study. He said it was a family heirloom, but he never wore it. Sherlock thanked her and dismissed her gently, his mind already turning to the next thread. As Clara left, Hastings leaned in. "Sherlock, this cufflink. It could belong to anyone in the family, or even a thief. And that burned paper, what does it mean?" Sherlock's smile was enigmatic. "The cufflink, it narrows our field. The paper, it speaks of trust, or the lack thereof. Someone in this house betrayed Sir Reginald, and the vault holds the key to their motive. Tomorrow, we shall open it." As they retired for the night, the manor seemed to close in around them, its shadows deepening with each unanswered question. The cufflink, the charred paper, the locked vault. These were the clues that would lead Sherlock Holmes to the truth, but the path was fraught with deception. Hastings felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the certainty that the murderer was watching, waiting for Sherlock to falter. But Sherlock Holmes, with his little grey cells, never faltered. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The third morning at Blackthorn Manor broke with a sky so heavy with clouds that the light barely penetrated the tall windows, casting the rooms in a sombre half-gloom. The oppressive atmosphere mirrored the growing tension among the guests, who moved through the manor like actors in a play they no longer understood. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the morning room with a cup of cooling coffee, felt the weight of the unsolved murder pressing ever harder. The clues, Sir Reginald's cryptic letter, the gold cufflink, the charred scrap of paper, swirled in his mind, but their meaning remained elusive, like a melody just out of reach. Sherlock discoveries.
That cufflink, Sherlock. It points to someone close to the family, doesn't it? And the burned paper with trust. It's as if Sir Reginald suspected someone. Précisément, Sherlock replied, his voice low and deliberate. The cufflink is a marker, the paper a warning. But we must dig deeper, Hastings. The vault, it holds the heart of this mystery, and the lies we uncover today will lead us to its lock. Their first task was to revisit the vault, which Inspector Grayson had reluctantly agreed to open under Sherlock's supervision. The heavy iron door in the east wing loomed before them, its gleaming lock a silent challenge. Hargreaves, the butler, produced the key found on Sir Reginald's body, and with a slow, deliberate turn, the door creaked open. The small chamber within was as they had left it, steel boxes lining the walls, the central safe unyielding. Sherlock's eyes swept over the room, noting every detail, the faint dust on the boxes, the polished surface of the safe, the absence of any disturbance. The safe, Sherlock murmured, his fingers brushing its dial. It requires a combination, one that Sir Reginald alone knew. Hargreaves, you are certain no one else had access? The butler nodded solemnly. Quite certain, sir. Sir Reginald was most particular about the vault. Even I was never permitted inside. Sherlock's gaze lingered on the safe, his mind clearly racing. Then we must deduce the combination, or find another way to learn its contents. For now, let us return to the guests. Back in the drawing room, Sherlock resumed his interviews, his questions now sharper, designed to pierce the facades the guests had erected. He began with Mr. Charles Vane, whose accusation against Julian Trent had stirred suspicion the previous day. Vane sat heavily in an armchair, his florid face slick with perspiration despite the cool air. Monsieur Vane, Sherlock said, his tone deceptively mild, your debt to Sir Reginald. It was substantial, oui? Yet you claim it was merely a loan between friends. Tell me, did Sir Reginald ever threaten to call in this debt? Vane's hands trembled as he reached for his handkerchief. He noted something. Lady Beatrice twisted her handkerchief, her eyes darting to Miss Clara, who sat nearby, pale and silent. It was heated, yes, but I didn't eavesdrop. I only heard raised voices. Clara mentioned a suitor, and Sir Reginald was furious. That's all I know. Sherlock's gaze shifted to Miss Clara, who flinched under his scrutiny. Mademoiselle,
This suitor, his name, if you please. And what did he know of the vault? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. His name is Edward Marlowe. He's a gentleman I met in London. I told him about the vault once, in confidence, but he didn't care about it. He loves me, not my inheritance. Sherlock's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. Merci, mademoiselle. Your candor is noted. The interviews continued, each revealing new layers of deception. Dr. Evelyn Warwick, when questioned about her consultation with Sir Reginald, admitted he had sought her advice about a heart condition, but she insisted it was minor and unrelated to his death. He was anxious, she added, her voice measured, but he wouldn't say why. I prescribed rest and a mild sedative. Mr. Julian Trent, ever composed, reiterated his alibi. But Sherlock's mention of the cufflink elicited a subtle reaction, a slight tightening of his jaw. I own no such cufflink, Trent said firmly. If it bears the Ashburn crest, it could belong to anyone in the family, or a servant, perhaps. As the day wore on, a new piece of information surfaced, courtesy of the young maid, Emily, who approached Sherlock with visible trepidation. Sir, she said, her voice trembling, I didn't want to say before, but I saw something odd that night. After dinner I was tidying the hall, and I saw Mr. Vane near the library door. He looked furtive, like he was listening at the keyhole. Sherlock's eyes gleamed with interest. At what time, mademoiselle? Just before 10, Emily replied, wringing her hands. I didn't think much of it then, but after what happened— Merci, Emily, Sherlock said, dismissing her gently, to Hastings. To the truth. As night fell, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, its corridors whispering of hidden motives and betrayals. Sherlock retired to his room, but Hastings knew his friend's mind was far from rest. The cufflink, the charred paper, the numbers, each clue was a piece of the puzzle, and Sherlock Holmes was assembling it with relentless precision. The murderer, whoever they were, was running out of shadows to hide in. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The fourth day at Blackthorn Manor dawned with a restless energy, as though the very stones of the estate were impatient for the truth to be revealed. The guests, confined by the ongoing investigation, moved through the grand rooms with a mixture of dread and exhaustion, their facades of civility fraying under the strain. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the drawing-room with his notebook, felt the tension like a taut wire, ready to snap. The clues, the gold cufflink, the charred paper, the cryptic numbers, had begun to form a pattern in his mind. But it was Sherlock Holmes, with his unerring logic, who held the key to unlocking the mystery. Sherlock stood by the tall windows, his small frame silhouetted against the gray morning light. He held the folded paper bearing the numbers 12-7-19. His gray eyes fixed on it with an intensity that suggested he was peering into the very soul of the case. To Hastings, it was clear that his friend was on the cusp of a breakthrough, though the final pieces of the puzzle remained tantalizingly out of reach. Mon ami, Sherlock said, turning to Hastings. The human heart. It is both the motive and the betrayer. Today we shall see one of these hearts break, and in that breaking, the truth will begin to emerge. Hastings frowned, puzzled. Break, Sherlock? You mean someone will confess? Not confess, perhaps, Sherlock replied, his voice low and deliberate, but reveal. The pressure it builds, and the guilty, they cannot withstand it forever. The morning's inquiries began with a renewed focus on Miss Clara Ashbourne, whose fragile demeanor had grown more pronounced with each passing day. Sherlock requested her presence in the small parlor, where the fire cast a warm glow that did little to dispel the chill in the air. Clara enters, eyes piercing. And yet, mademoiselle, you mentioned the vault to this Marlowe. Why? What did you tell him, and what did he ask in return? Clara's hands trembled, and she pressed the handkerchief to her lips. For a moment, It seemed she would remain silent. But then, as though a dam had broken, she spoke in a rush. "I told him about the vault because he asked about Uncle's wealth. He said he needed money, just a loan, to settle some debts. I thought if I told him about the vault, he'd see I was serious about helping him. But he didn't care about it. I swear. He loves me." Her voice broke, and she dissolved into sobs, her shoulders shaking. Hastings felt a pang of sympathy, but Sherlock's expression remained impassive, though his eyes softened slightly. "Merci, mademoiselle," he said. "Your honesty. It is a step toward the truth. But tell me, did you ever see this cufflink before?" He produced the gold cufflink, its ashbourne crest glinting in the firelight. Clara's tears paused as she looked at it, her face paling. I think so. Uncle had a pair like it in his study, but I haven't seen them in years." Sherlock nodded, dismissing her gently. As she left, he turned to Hastings. "Her heart breaks, Hastings, but not for guilt. She is caught between love and loyalty. And her suitor, this Marlowe, he is a shadow we must investigate. But the cufflink, it points closer to home." The next interview was with Mr. Charles Vane, whose accusation against Julian Trent had stirred suspicion. Vane entered the parlor with a swagger that belied his nervous eyes, his florid face slick with perspiration. Sherlock wasted no time. "Monsieur Vane," he said, "you were seen near the library door before the murder. Listening, perhaps. Yet you claim to have been in the drawing room, seeing Monsieur Trent outside. Which is the truth?" Vane's eyes widened, and he stammered, I don't know what you mean. I was in the drawing room, as I said. That maid, Emily, she's mistaken." Sherlock's smile was razor-sharp. "Mistake?"
"There is more you conceal, and we shall uncover it." As Vane left, visibly shaken, Hastings leaned toward Sherlock. "Good Lord, Sherlock, he's falling apart. Do you think he's the murderer?" "No," Sherlock replied, "but he is a man with secrets. His debt, his eavesdropping, they make him a pawn in a larger game. The true murderer, they are more cunning." The day continued with further revelations. Dr. Evelyn Warwick, when questioned again, admitted to prescribing Sir Reginald a sedative stronger than she had initially claimed, one that could cause disorientation if misused. "He was agitated," she said, her voice steady but her eyes guarded. "I thought it would help him rest." "And did you administer this sedative yourself?" Sherlock asked. "No," she replied firmly. "I gave him the bottle and instructions. He was to take it sparingly." Sherlock's expression betrayed nothing, but Hastings knew his friend was cataloging every word. The final interview was with Mr. Julian Trent, whose composure had begun to show cracks. When confronted with Vane's admission, he maintained his alibi, but admitted to a brief conversation with Sir Reginald earlier that day, concerning legal matters related to the estate. "The vault?" Sherlock asked pointedly. Trent's jaw tightened. "He mentioned it, yes, but only as part of the estate's assets. I had no interest in its contents." As the interviews concluded, Sherlock led Hastings to the vault once more, the numbers 12-7-19 burning in his mind. With Inspector Grayson's reluctant permission, they tested the combination on the safe. The dial turned smoothly, and with a soft click, the door swung open, revealing a small cache of documents, a velvet pouch, and a sealed envelope. Sherlock opened the pouch, revealing a pair of gold cufflinks identical to the one found in the library. "The mate," Sherlock murmured, his eyes gleaming. "And these documents, letters, contracts, a codicil to the will. They speak of betrayal, Hastings, and a secret worth killing for." As they left the vault, the weight of Clara's tears, Vane's confession, and the vault's contents pressed upon Hastings. The manor, once a place of grand revelation. Sherlock Holmes, ever the calm center of the storm, stood by the fireplace,
his small frame radiating an authority that commanded the room. In his hand, he held the sealed envelope retrieved from the vault the previous day, its contents still a mystery. His grey eyes, sharp as ever, surveyed the gathered guests: Lady Beatrice Langley, Miss Clara Ashburn, Mr. Charles Vane, Dr. Evelyn Warwick, and Mr. Julian Trent, each of whom seemed to shrink under his gaze. Inspector Grayson, flanked by 2 constables, stood near the door, his face a mask of grudging respect for the Belgian detective. "Mesdames et messieurs," Sherlock began, his voice clear and resonant, "we stand at a crossroads in this investigation. The truth of Sir Reginald Ashburn's murder lies within our grasp, but it is guarded by lies and half-truths. Today, we shall lay a trap for the guilty, and they will reveal themselves." Hastings felt a thrill of anticipation, tempered by unease. Sherlock's traps were legendary, often involving a psychological gambit that exposed the culprit through their own reactions. But the stakes at Blackthorn Manor were high, and the murderer, whoever they were, was cunning enough to have orchestrated a locked-room killing. Sherlock held up the envelope, its wax seal unbroken. "This," he said, "was found in the vault, alongside documents and a pair of cufflinks matching the one discovered in the library. Its contents, I believe, hold the motive for Sir Reginald's death. But before we open it, let us review the facts." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice a steady cadence. Sir Reginald was shot in a locked room, the revolver bearing his fingerprints, yet the angle of the wound, the dry pen, the burned paper with the word "trust," these suggest a murder most ingenious. The cufflink, bearing the Ashburn crest, points to someone close to the family. The vault, with its secrets, was the heart of Sir Reginald's concerns, as evidenced by his unfinished letter. And now we have the confessions. Miss Clara's suitor, Mr. Vane, without trace. How? Inspector Grayson snorted, but his tone lacked conviction. "You're suggesting the impossible, Sherlock. The room was sealed. Suicide is the only logical conclusion." Sherlock's smile was sharp as a blade. "Logical, Inspector? No, it is lazy. The truth, it requires imagination. Let us test a hypothesis." He turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. "Suppose the murderer used the vault itself as a means of entry or escape. The iron door, it is heavy, but not soundproof. Could someone have hidden there, waiting for Sir Reginald?" A murmur rippled through the room, and Hastings saw a flicker of alarm in Mr. Trent's eyes. Sherlock pressed on, his tone deliberate. "Or perhaps the revolver was tampered with, placed in Sir Reginald's hand after death to suggest suicide. The cufflink, dropped in haste, betrays the killer's presence. And this envelope, shall we see what it reveals?" He broke the seal with a deft movement, drawing out a single sheet of paper. The guests leaned forward, their breath held, as Sherlock read aloud, "To whom it may concern, I, Reginald Ashbourne, have uncovered a betrayal that threatens my family's legacy. The contents of the vault must remain sealed until the truth is known. I suspect one among my guests seeks to exploit its secrets for their own gain." A collective gasp filled the room. Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her mouth. Miss Clara sobbed softly, and Mr. Vane's face turned ashen. Dr. Warwick's eyes narrowed, while Mr. Trent's fingers stilled on his cigarette case, his expression unreadable. Sherlock folded the letter, his eyes sweeping the group. "This letter confirms Sir Reginald's fears. Someone in this room betrayed his trust, and that betrayal led to murder. I propose a test. Each of you will provide a sample of your handwriting, to compare with a document found in the vault, a contract that may reveal the traitor. The suggestion was met with a chorus of protests. Lady Beatrice cried, "This is outrageous!" Mr. Vane stammered, "I've done nothing wrong." Miss Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Warwick remained. "Any more?" he shouted, his voice breaking. "I didn't kill him, but I knew about the vault. Sir Reginald told me it contained evidence of fraud. Someone was embezzling from his investments. I begged him to keep it quiet. For my sake." The room froze, all eyes on Vane. Sherlock's expression was one of quiet triumph. "Merci, Monsieur Vane. Your outburst, it is most revealing. But you are not the murderer, merely a pawn. The true killer, they are still among us." Vane collapsed into his chair, sobbing, as the others stared in shock. Hastings felt a surge of excitement. Sherlock's trap had worked, exposing Vane's secret and tightening the net around the true culprit. But who was it? The cufflink, the letter, the vault's contents, all pointed to a calculated mind, one that had planned the murder with chilling precision. As the guests were dismissed, Sherlock drew Hastings aside. "The trap, it is sprung, mon ami," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Vane's confession clears one path, but the murderer grows nervous. Tomorrow, we shall open the vault's final secrets and confront the killer." The manor settled into an uneasy silence, but Hastings knew the storm was far from over. Sherlock's trap had shaken the guilty, and the truth was closer than ever. The game, as always, was in his hands. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The 6th day at Blackthorn Manor dawned with an air of finality, as though the very walls of the estate knew that the truth could no longer be contained. The guests, their nerves frayed by days of suspicion and Sherlock Holmes's unrelenting pursuit, gathered in the drawing-room with a palpable sense of dread. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the fireplace, felt his heart pound with anticipation. The clues, the gold cufflink, the charred paper, the vault's contents, and Mr. Vane's desperate confession had woven a complex web, and now Sherlock was poised to unravel it. Sherlock stood at the center of the room, his small frame commanding the attention of all present. His gray eyes, sharp as a blade, swept his notebook forgotten as Sherlock began his exposition. "Let us begin with the scene," he said, pacing slowly. Sir Reginald was found shot in the library, the door locked, the window secure. The revolver bore his fingerprints, suggesting suicide, yet the angle of the wound, slightly upward, was inconsistent with a self-inflicted shot. The pen on the desk was dry, yet the letter, with its warning about the vault, was freshly written. A cufflink, bearing the Ashbourne crest, was found beneath the desk, and a burned scrap of paper bore the word "Trust." These are not the marks of suicide, but of murder. Lady Beatrice gasped softly, clutching her handkerchief. Miss Clara's eyes were wide with fear, while Mr. Vane's hands trembled. Dr. Warwick's expression remained impassive, but her fingers tightened on the arm of her chair. Mr. Trent's sharp features were unreadable, though his eyes never left Sherlock. "First, the motive," Sherlock continued. "The vault, it was the heart of this crime. Sir Reginald's letter spoke of a betrayal, and the documents within the vault, a codicil to his will, contracts and letters, revealed a scheme of embezzlement. Someone close to him was stealing from his investments, threatening his legacy. This person, they feared exposure, and so they killed to keep the vault sealed." Sherlock paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Now, the method. The locked room, it is not impenetrable. The key, found in Hargreaves' possession, was used to lock the door after the murder, creating the illusion of a sealed room. The murderer entered the library, shot Sir Reginald, and left, locking the door behind them. But how? The answer lies in the fireplace. He gestured toward the hearth, where the faint traces of ash had first caught his attention. The burned paper with the word trust was not burned in the library fire, which was unlit. It was burned elsewhere, perhaps to destroy evidence of the embezzlement scheme. The cufflink, dropped in haste, places the murderer in the room. And the revolver, its fingerprints were Sir Reginald's, yes, but they were manipulated. The killer, wearing gloves, placed the gun in his hand after death. A murmur continued. Your suitor, Edward Marlowe, sought your uncle's wealth, and you confided in him about the vault. But your tears, they are for love, not murder. You are innocent. Clara sobbed softly, relief flooding her features. Sherlock's gaze moved to Mr. Vane. Monsieur Vane, your debt and eavesdropping made you a suspect, but your confession yesterday revealed your fear, not your guilt. You knew of the embezzlement, but did not kill. Vane exhaled shakily, his head bowed. Sherlock turned to Dr. Warwick, his expression unyielding. Madam Warwick, your sedative could have disoriented Sir Reginald, but your composure is that of a bystander, not a killer. You prescribed the drug, but you did not administer it. Dr. Warwick's eyes narrowed, but she remained silent. Finally, Sherlock faced Mr. Julian Trent, whose sharp features tightened under the scrutiny. Monsieur Trent, Sherlock said, you claimed to be in the billiard room, yet Vane's accusation placed you near the library. Your handwriting matches a contract in the vault, a contract detailing the embezzlement of Sir Reginald's funds. And the cufflink, it is yours, is it not? Trent's hand froze on his cigarette case, his composure cracking. You have no proof, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Nor, Sherlock replied, producing the second cufflink from the vault. This matches the one found in the library. You wore them that night, Monsieur Trent, and one fell as you staged the scene. You were Sir Reginald's solicitor, trusted with his affairs, yet you betrayed him, siphoning funds for your own gain. When he discovered your scheme, you confronted him in the library, drugged him with Warwick's sedative to ensure compliance, and shot him, arranging the scene to suggest suicide. Trent's face twisted with fury, but Sherlock pressed on, relentless. You locked the door with the key, which you later slipped to Hargreaves, claiming it was found on the body. The burned paper, it was a letter from Sir Reginald, accusing you of betrayal. You destroyed it, but one fragment survived. Your mistake, Monsieur Trent, was underestimating the little grey cell.
How did you know it was Trent? Sherlock's eyes gleamed. The details, Hastings. The cufflink, the handwriting, the burned paper. They told a story of greed and betrayal. Trent's composure, it was his mask, but it could not hide the truth from Sherlock Holmes. As the guests dispersed, their relief mingled with shock. The manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. The game was over, and Sherlock had won, as he always did. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The aftermath of Julian Trent's arrest hung over Blackthorn Manor like the last wisps of fog retreating before the morning sun. The grand estate, which had seemed so oppressive under the weight of suspicion and secrets, now felt lighter, as though its very walls exhaled in relief. Yet for Captain Arthur Hastings, the resolution of the mystery brought not only satisfaction, but a lingering sense of melancholy. The elegance of Sherlock Holmes's solution, while brilliant, underscored the darker currents of human nature, greed, betrayal, and the lengths to which one might go to protect a secret. The drawing room, where the dramatic reveal had taken place only hours before, was now quiet, save for the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional clink of a teacup. The guests had dispersed to their rooms, some to pack, others to process the shock of Trent's unmasking. Inspector Grayson and his constables had departed with the prisoner, leaving the manor in a state of uneasy calm. Hastings sat in an armchair, his notebook open but untouched, his mind replaying the events of the past days. Sherlock Holmes stood by the tall windows, gazing out at the gardens where the mist had finally lifted, revealing the stark beauty of the autumn landscape. His small frame was as immaculate as ever, his hands clasped behind his back. But there was a stillness about him that Hastings recognized, a moment of reflection that followed the resolution of a case. The Belgian detective's gray eyes, so often sharp and piercing, were softened now, as though contemplating something beyond the immediate triumph. "Mon ami," Sherlock said, turning to Hastings with a faint smile. "You are pensive. The case is solved, the murderer apprehended, yet you sit with the air of a man who has lost something. Tell me, what troubles you?"
"Consider this case," he continued, his voice low and reflective. "The locked room, the cufflink, the burned paper. These were not mere clues, but windows into the soul of the crime. Trent's greed drove him to embezzle. His fear of exposure drove him to murder. And his arrogance led him to believe he could outwit Sherlock Holmes. But the little gray cells, they do not falter." Hastings nodded, though a question lingered. "But the vault, Sherlock, what was so important that it cost Sir Reginald his life? The documents, the codicil, did they really justify murder?" Sherlock's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a puzzle fully solved. "The vault, mon ami, it contained more than mere wealth. The contracts revealed Trent's embezzlement, a scheme that siphoned thousands from Sir Reginald's investments. The codicil to the will named Miss Clara as the sole heir, cutting off any claim Trent might have hoped to manipulate as Sir Reginald's solicitor. And the letters, they spoke of Trent's betrayal, written by Sir Reginald to his lawyer in London, ready to expose him. Trent knew that once the vault was opened, his ruin was certain." Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "And the sedative? How did Trent use it?" "A simple but clever ruse," Sherlock replied. "Dr. Warwick prescribed it. But Trent, with access to Sir Reginald's study, slipped a dose into his brandy before dinner. It disoriented Sir Reginald, making him easier to overpower. Trent entered the library under the pretext of a legal discussion, shot him, and staged the scene as suicide. The cufflink, dropped in haste, was his undoing." Hastings shook his head in admiration. "It's extraordinary, Sherlock. The way you pieced it together, the handwriting, the cufflink, the burned paper. But how did you know to focus on Trent so early?" Sherlock's smile was enigmatic. "The little details, Hastings. Trent's alibi was too perfect, his composure too studied. The cufflink, it bore the Ashbourne crest, yet Sir Reginald did not wear such items. Trent, as solicitor, had access to the family's heirlooms. The handwriting on the contract matched his, and his reaction reserved. "It was my duty, mademoiselle. Sir Reginald's trust in you was well placed. Guard the vault wisely." Clara nodded, tears brimming. "I will. And I've ended things with Edward Marlowe. He wasn't who I thought he was." "A wise decision," Sherlock said softly. "The heart, it learns through pain." As Clara left, Hastings turned to Sherlock, a question burning in his mind. "What now, old chap?" "The case is solved. Trent is in custody. Do we return to London?" Sherlock List's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. "For now, yes. But the world, it is full of puzzles, Hastings. The little grey cells, they are never idle. They gathered their belongings, preparing to depart Blackthorn Manor. As they stepped into the crisp autumn air, the estate seemed to stand taller, its secrets laid bare." Sherlock paused at the gravel drive, glancing back at the ivy-clad walls. "A fine stage, this manor," he murmured. "But the drama, it is over." Hastings smiled, falling into step beside his friend. "Until the next one, Sherlock." Sherlock's laugh was soft, almost musical. "Oui, mon ami. Until the next one." As their motorcar wound through the Kentish hills, Hastings felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. The mystery of the locked vault was solved,
the murderer unmasked, and Sherlock Holmes, with his unparalleled genius, had once again brought light to the darkness. The world, as he had said, was full of puzzles, and Hastings knew that wherever they went, Sherlock would be ready to solve them. Chapter 12. The Aftermath. The departure from Blackthorn Manor left a quiet void in its wake, as though the estate itself were recovering from the storm of secrets and revelations that had swept through its halls. The late afternoon sun, breaking through the heavy clouds, cast long shadows across the Kentish countryside as Captain Arthur Hastings and Sherlock Holmes travelled back toward London. The motorcar's steady hum was a soothing contrast to the turmoil of the past days, but Hastings found his thoughts lingering on the case, its intricacies still vivid in his mind. Sherlock, seated beside him, was as composed. Hastings nodded, his mind turning to the guests left behind at Blackthorn Manor. What do you think will become of them? Miss Clara especially. She's been through so much. Sherlock's expression softened, a rare flicker of empathy crossing his features. Mademoiselle Clara, she is young but resilient. The loss of her uncle, the betrayal of her suitor, these are wounds, yes, but they will heal. The vault's contents, they secure her future, and her decision to part with Marlowe shows a strength of character. She will endure. And the others? Hastings pressed. Lady Beatrice, Vane, Dr. Warwick. Sherlock's gaze returned to the window, his voice thoughtful. Lady Beatrice, she will return to her society circles, her tongue wagging with tales of this weekend, though tempered by the lesson of discretion. Monsieur Vane, his debts will haunt him, but his confession has freed him from the shadow of suspicion. As for Dr. Warwick, her detachment, it is her shield, but she will carry the weight of her unwitting role in the crime. They will all move forward, as people do, shaped by what has passed. The motorcar wound through a small village, its cottages glowing warmly in the fading light. Hastings felt a pang of nostalgia for the simplicity of such places, so far removed from the intrigues of Blackthorn Manor. It's a grim business, Sherlock, he said. All this deceit, this greed. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, delving into such darkness. Sherlock turned to him, his eyes sharp but kind. Worth it, Hastings? It is worth it. For every darkness we uncover, we restore a measure of justice. Sir Reginald's death, it was a tragedy, but his murderer is brought to account. The truth, it is a light that banishes the shadows. That is why we do what we do. They fell into a companionable silence, the weight of the case settling into the past. As they neared London, the city's lights began to twinkle in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond the manor's confines. Sherlock requested a stop at a telegraph office, where he sent evening awaited. Hastings, stepping out of the car, felt a sense of closure, though he knew that for Sherlock, the end of one case was merely the prelude to another. "Will you rest now, Sherlock?" he asked, half in jest. "Or are the little gray cells already itching for the next puzzle?" Sherlock's laugh was soft, almost musical. "Rest, Hastings. Perhaps for a moment. But the world, it is never short of mysteries. And Sherlock Holmes? He is always ready." As they ascended the steps to their rooms, Hastings glanced back at the darkening streets, where countless stories waited to unfold. The case of the locked vault was closed. But the game, as Sherlock had said, was never truly over. With his friend by his side, Hastings knew they would face whatever came next, armed with logic, observation, and the indomitable spirit of the little gray cells. Chapter 13. The Legacy of the Vault. The return to London brought with it a sense of normalcy, yet the echoes of Blackthorn Manor lingered in Captain Arthur Hastings's mind, like the afterimage of a vivid dream. The city's clamor, its honking motor cars, bustling pedestrians, and the distant chime of Big Ben stood in stark contrast to the cloistered silence of the Kentish estate.
where murder and betrayal had woven a tangled web. Hastings, seated in the familiar comfort of their Baker Street lodgings, found his thoughts drifting back to the vault, the cufflink, and the brilliant mind that had unraveled their secrets. Sherlock Holmes, ever the picture of meticulous calm, sat at his desk, his small hands sorting through a stack of correspondence. The fire in the grate cast a warm glow across his features, softening the sharp lines of his face. His gray eyes, though focused on the letters before him, held a spark of lingering satisfaction, the residue of a case well solved. Hastings, nursing a glass of brandy, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and curiosity, wondering what thoughts occupied the little gray cells now that the mystery was laid to rest. "Sherlock," Hastings ventured, breaking the companionable silence. "It's been a week since we left Blackthorn Manor, and I still find myself turning the case over in my mind. The vault, what do you
Learns through pain, as I told her. But it is not only Clara who must learn. The others, Lady Beatrice, Vane, Dr. Warwick, they too are marked by this affair. The truth, it changes those who encounter it."
Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "Do you think they'll speak of it? Lady Beatrice especially. She's the sort to turn this into a society scandal." Sherlock's lips curved into a faint smile.
"Lady Beatrice, she will talk, yes, but with caution. The scandal of a murder in their midst, it is a tale too rich to suppress, yet she knows the value of discretion. As for Vane, his debts will keep him humble, and Dr. Warwick, her professional reputation will demand silence. They will carry their secrets quietly, as we all do." The conversation paused as Mrs. Hudson entered with a tray of tea, her presence a comforting reminder of routine. As she left, Sherlock poured a cup, his movements precise and deliberate. "The vault, Hastings," he said. "It was more than a repository of wealth. It was a symbol of trust, and its violation cost Sir Reginald his life. Trent's greed, it was his undoing. But it was also a lesson in the fragility of human loyalty." Hastings sipped his brandy, reflecting on the case's intricacies. "That cufflink, Sherlock, it was such a small thing, yet it pointed straight to Trent. How do you do it? See what others miss." Sherlock's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They are trained to observe. The cufflink, it was not merely a trinket but a signature, dropped in haste by a man who thought himself untouchable. The burned paper, the handwriting, the sedative, these were the notes of a symphony, and I, Sherlock Holmes, merely conducted it." Hastings chuckled, shaking his head. "You make it sound so simple, but it was anything but. The locked room, the staged suicide, it was devilishly clever." "Clever, yes," Sherlock said, "but not infallible. The murderer, he always leaves a trace, a flaw in the design. It is our task to find it, to bring order to the chaos. That is the essence of detective." Yet, as he watched Sherlock return to his correspondence, he knew that the detective's mind was already turning to the next challenge, the next puzzle, waiting in the shadows. "Will you write this one up, Hastings?" Sherlock asked, glancing up with a teasing smile. "The tale of the locked vault. It has a certain drama, no?" Hastings laughed, raising his glass. "I might just do that, Sherlock. But I'll never capture the brilliance of those little grey cells." Sherlock's laugh was soft, a rare sound that warmed the room. "Then write of the truth, mon ami. That is enough." As the fire crackled and the city hummed beyond, Hastings felt a quiet pride in his role as chronicler. The legacy of the vault, like the legacy of Sherlock Holmes, would endure, a testament to the power of reason in the face of darkness. Chapter 14. The Shadows of Truth. The days following the resolution of the Blackthorn Manor mystery settled into a rhythm of quiet routine. But for Captain Arthur Hastings, the echoes of the case lingered like a half-remembered melody. The bustle of London,
with its crowded streets and ceaseless energy, offered a stark contrast to the cloistered tension of the Kentish estate. Yet Hastings found himself revisiting the locked library, the gleaming vault, and the cunning mind of Julian Trent. The case, though solved, had left its mark, stirring questions about trust and betrayal that refused to fade. Sherlock Holmes, ensconced in their Baker Street lodgings, appeared untouched by such musings. He sat at his desk, surrounded by a clutter of books and papers, his small hands deftly annotating a chemical treatise. The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the sharp angles of his face and the keen intensity of his grey eyes. To an outsider, he might have seemed wholly absorbed in his work, but Hastings knew better. Sherlock's mind was never truly at rest, always sifting through the details of past cases or anticipating the next. "Sherlock," Hastings said, breaking the silence as he set aside his newspaper, "I've been thinking about Blackthorn Manor. The way you unraveled Trent's scheme, it was brilliant, of course, but it makes me wonder, how many others are out?"
Flawless. But he forgot the small things, the cufflink, the burned paper, the inconsistency of the sedative. These are the shadows of truth, Hastings, and they betray even the most cunning. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a letter, delivered by Mrs. Hudson with her usual quiet efficiency. Sherlock opened it, his eyes scanning the contents with rapid precision. "From Miss Clara Ashbourne," he said, passing it to Hastings. "She writes to express her gratitude and to share news of the estate." Hastings read the letter, written in Clara's delicate hand. She described her efforts to manage the Ashbourne legacy, her decision to sell certain investments to secure the manor's future, and her determination to honor her uncle's memory. "I have opened the vault," she wrote, "and found among its contents a letter from Uncle Reginald addressed to me. He spoke of his pride in my strength, and his hope that I would carry the family name with honor. Your work, Monsieur Sherlock, has given me the chance to do so." Hastings felt a warmth at the words, a sense of closure that had eluded him. "She's doing well, then," he said, handing the letter back. "It's good to know the vault's secrets are in safe hands." "Oui," Sherlock agreed, folding the letter carefully. "Mademoiselle Clara. She has learned the weight of responsibility. The vault. It was not merely a repository of wealth, but a test of character. She has passed it." Hastings hesitated, then ventured, "And what of the others? Lady Beatrice, Vane, Dr. Warwick, do you think they've learned anything from this?" Sherlock's smile was enigmatic. "They have learned, perhaps, to guard their secrets more closely. Lady Beatrice will weave her tales with greater care. Vane will tread lightly under the shadow of his debts, and Dr. Warwick will question her own detachment. But the human heart, it is slow to change. They will carry their lessons quietly, as we carry ours." The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the room, and Hastings felt a sudden urge to revisit one final detail. "That burned paper, Sherlock, the one with trust written on it. You said it was part of a letter accusing Trent." "Grey cells. They see what others ignore, and in that seeing, they find the truth." As evening settled over Baker Street, the city's hum softened into a gentle murmur, a backdrop to the quiet satisfaction of a case well closed. Hastings rose to pour another brandy, feeling a sense of camaraderie with his friend. The shadows of Blackthorn Manor had been banished, but new mysteries awaited, hidden in the corners of the world. With Sherlock by his side, Hastings was ready to face them, armed with the certainty that no secret could withstand the light of those little grey cells. Chapter 15. The Final Note. The soft glow of lamplight filled the Baker Street lodgings, casting a warm ambience over the familiar clutter of books, papers, and chemical apparatus that defined Sherlock Holmes's domain. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the resolution of the Blackthorn Manor mystery, and yet the case lingered in Captain Arthur Hastings's thoughts, its intricacies a testament to the brilliance of his friend. Outside, London hummed with its ceaseless rhythm. But within these walls,
A quiet satisfaction prevailed, the aftermath of a puzzle masterfully solved. Sherlock sat in his armchair, a violin resting on his knee, its bow poised but still. His grey eyes, so often sharp with intensity, held a rare tranquility, as though the little grey cells were, for the moment, at rest. Hastings, seated across from him with a cup of tea, felt a sense of completion, though the weight of the case, the locked room, the vault, the betrayal, still stirred questions in his mind. "Sherlock," Hastings said, setting his cup down, "I've been thinking about Blackthorn Manor, and I can't help but marvel at how it all came together. The way you saw through Trent's deception, it was like watching a painter complete a masterpiece. But do you ever tire of it? The constant delving into human greed and treachery?" Sherlock's lips curved into a faint, reflective smile. He set the violin aside, his hands folding neatly in his lap. "Tire, mon ami? No, I do not tire. The human heart, it is a canvas of endless complexity, greed, treachery, yes."
Case's pivotal moments. The cufflink glinting beneath the library desk, the charred paper with its single word, the vault's iron door yielding to the combination 12-7-19. "It's the details, isn't it?" he said. "Those small things, Trent's cufflink, the burned paper, the sedative, they were the keys to it all." Sherlock's eyes gleamed with a quiet pride. "Précisément, Hastings, the details. They are the language of truth. The cufflink betrayed Trent's presence, the paper his attempt to conceal his betrayal, the sedative his method of control. Each was a note in the symphony of the crime, and I, Sherlock Holmes, merely played the conductor." A gentle knock at the door heralded Mrs. Hudson, bearing a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "This came for you, Mr. Holmes," she said, handing it to him before retreating. Sherlock unwrapped the parcel, revealing a slim, leather-bound book and a note. He read the note first, his expression softening. "From Miss Clara," he said, passing it to Hastings. "A token of her gratitude." The note was brief but heartfelt. "Monsieur Sherlock, this book belonged to my uncle, a collection of his favorite essays on justice and truth. I hope it brings you as much inspiration as your work has brought me peace. Yours sincerely, Clara Ashbourne." Hastings opened the book, its pages worn but cherished, and felt a warmth at the gesture. "She's a good sort, Clara," he said. "This is a fitting end to the story." Sherlock nodded, his fingers brushing the book's cover. "A fitting end, oui, but also a beginning. The truth, it does not merely close a case, it opens a path forward. For Clara, for us, for all who seek justice." The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the room, and Hastings felt a profound sense of camaraderie. The mystery of the locked vault had been a dark chapter, but its resolution was a triumph of reason over deceit. He raised his teacup in a silent toast. "To the little grey cells, Sherlock. May they never falter." Sherlock's laugh was soft, a rare melody that filled the room. "To the truth, mon ami. And to the next puzzle, for there will always be another." As the evening deepened, the city's hum faded into a gentle lullaby, and Hastings